So let's move into the 3D realm. To show you how 3D works in CAD, I'm going to model a household item. I'm going to use my mug. You've all probably seen me drinking tea out of my mug. I can't get through about 2 hours without drinking at least one cup of tea. Let's think about what a mug looks like, how we recognise a mug. A mug is basically a cylinder, a hollow cylinder with an open end and then a weird ear-like protrusion that sticks out the side, but we use as a handle. In that, I would say the most fundamental shape to that mug is the cylindrical outer body of the liquid receptacle, shall we say. This way of thinking is the important logic as to how you build up complex geometries in CAD. So you start with the most simplistic, most basic geometry, and then you add and remove other basic geometry until you build something up which is really quite complicated. It's known as Boolean logic, Boolean geometry. It's where you've got summative, additive collections of lots of different simplistic geometries known as primitives that combine together to make the entire object. So with that in mind, let's get stuck in and draw a sketch. So we're going to choose a plane to make a sketch on, and I'm going to do this work by using only the extrusion tool rather than any of the others, and we'll repeat the same trick, create the same geometry in different ways using other techniques in different videos. So we'll start off, create our the end of our mug, or the bottom of our mug if you like. I think my mug is about 75 millimeters in diameter. I can then of course go and smart dimension that and make a change if I felt necessary. So actually let's make it 80, and then I am going to say okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to close my sketch. Very simplistic, and I'm going to start using 3D for the first time. So you can see here, if you hold your mouse button over any of the buttons on the ribbon, then you will be able to get a preview as to what this particular tool does. So I'm going to go back to extrude, and then I'm going to select the shape. Now it's important here that you notice when you're extruding things, you can choose lots and lots of different options as to where the geometry is coming from. I've already created a sketch, so I'm going to select my geometry from a sketch. Hover over, goes orange, left click, tick, and now we can choose our size. We can either do that dynamically ourselves, or we could type it in. So I think it's about 100 millimeters tall, and then either I go up or I go down, and I'm going to say yep, I quite like that. I could also go back in later on and I could say no, actually it was 95. So I've gone and created my first piece of geometry. What else could I do? Well, next up, let's add some more, so make it more complicated. I could choose create a new sketch, left click, again you can see this preview of what the tool does. Left click on the top face, and now I could go back in and say, well, I'd quite like to project a sketch because we've already got some geometry around the outside. I'd actually like to make an offset, click OK, choose an offset to be about 3 millimeters, that's the thickness of my mug. Choose the inside, and then do I want my offset to be inside or outside? So I'm going to choose inside, and then I'm going to say I'm quite happy with that. Click tick. We've got a new sketch, and this time rather than extruding, which makes new geometry, I'm going to use cut instead to cut through. So now I'm going to come in, I'm going to not use coincident plane, I'm going to select from a sketch, and I'm going to choose the shape I've just made. I'm going to click tick, and this time I'm going to cut into my material. And I actually think that this time it's probably about 90 millimeters deep, and it goes in that direction. And now if I go back to my view tab and I choose visible and hidden edges, you can see that I have hollowed it out. Now my mug actually has a slight recess underneath it, like most mugs do. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say, right, I'm going to come back home, and I'm going to choose to make a recess in the bottom as well. So there's a couple of ways in which I could do that. I could choose to just repeat and make another extruded cut, but I want to try and teach you as many things as I possibly can. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to try and create a plane, a mid-plane, in the material. I'm going to try and create a plane somewhere in the middle of the base here. So to do that, what I need to do is I need to hunt down the tools that allow me to make planes. Can find planes under the surfacing tab, and we can locate planes like so. So it's on the left here. I'm going to try selecting a plane, and I'm going to rotate around so I can try and select what I'm working with. So we've gone and chosen a plane, and I can actually create a new plane straight away, but that plane is totally coplanar with the original. That's not much use to me, so I'm going to undo that piece of work and I'm going to repeat it, and I'm going to try and create a plane which is only parallel. So here we are, second button down in the planes tab, parallel plane please, with that, but now I can move it around. So with that in mind, let's go to the right hand view so we can choose where to place this. I'm going to place it at, so this whole thing here is about 5 millimeters. Why don't I place this at 3.5 on this side? So left click to drop it where I want it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back out and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go back home and I'm going to mirror something. So I'm going to mirror the first cut I made. In the 3D mirror tool, we're not sketching here, we're in the 3D realm here on the main ribbon, with the home ribbon. And I'm going to choose the cut that I made. And then when it asks me for which plane I should use, so I'm going to tick that and say yes, I'm happy. Now you see it's asking me for which plane I want to use. I'm going to choose plane 5. And if I do that and I look to the left, you'll notice that I've now got 2 cuts. One for the main drinks receptacle and one for the recess at the bottom of a mug. So I can now finish that, and if I come back out and I go back to view, you can see that if I turn that back on, I've now got a recess underneath both. So this is all good news. What else can we do now then? Well, we could go very quickly and start to work on building a handle. So to do that, I think the best thing to do would be able to build on this view. So now we must try and build another profile which can then allow us to extrude from a side view, as it were, some thickness into a handle. So I'm going to need to sketch again, so I'm choosing a sketch, and now I need to choose a correct view to build the sketch onto. So I could actually try seeing which one's correct. That one's not correct. That one I can't see, and I know that's where I built the original module. So I'm going to choose the right hand view. I'm going to get into the sketch, and I'm going to start trying to work out how to build a model for our handle. So first up, let's try and project the correct geometry on. So that now seems to be good geometry. Left clicking all the way through, hit enter, and now let's try and work on building a handle. So I'm just going to pick my mug up and have a quick look at it and see if I can get this right. So with this in mind, I think the best thing for me to do would be to use a spline, or a curve as it's called here. I'm going to do that by choosing a snap straight onto the first object, and then I'm going to try and extrude outwards, and then maybe back onto the main body, and then maybe even come away a little bit to reduce that. So now we've got that, I'm just going to right click to end and take a quick look at my shape. I'm not amazingly happy with that actually, so I'm going to go back to dimensioning, and I'm going to say nope, I would quite like to dimension from point to point please, and say no, I think that 30 millimeters is about right there, and also that it would be useful for me to be able to dimension the correct height here. I think that's too much. and knock that down to 12. And I'm preferring that curve already. Now what I need to do is work on making sure that my cup handle is fully closed up, so we've got from point to point. So I've just created a new line in between, but maybe that's a lazy way of doing it. Maybe that's too fast. It would be more elegant to undo that action and perhaps even trim our way to it just to check that our shape is closed. You can see here I can select just the top. So I've trimmed there and I've trimmed here. It's gone to a square relationship, so that means it's a closed section. This is again good news. So now what I could also do is I could say, okay, I'd quite like to offset just this shape. I'm not sure I want to have it done as a chain, so I'm going to just say single, drop down and just choose the outside of the handle there. And I'm going to say, yep, that seems like a good move. I think 3mm looks pretty good. I want it to be on the inside, please. And I'm happy with that, so I'm gonna end that and close it. Now we do have some interesting features here. We've got an issue where the curve is ending too early. So to try and correct that and make it more realistic, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the end here and extend my curve out like so, and then have it readjoin. That's exactly what I do not want to happen. So let's try again. And press escape to close it. So you can see here that I've now managed to create a situation where we've got a bonded line there, and I'm now not liking the way that this bottom part of the handle runs through, so I'm just going to trim that. And then I'm going to trim the middle part of this line to create a closed region like so. So with all this, I can now close my sketch, and then I'm going to choose to look at it from an isometric view, and I'm going to try to extrude. So I'm going to select from a sketch, choose the object, I'm going to say yep, I'm happy with that, and now I'm going to try and extrude away. But we have a issue developing. Now I suspect it's because if we look from directly above, we have a region where the handle is just about in contact with the mug, but as it moves away, obviously it becomes an infinitely thin wedge. So I think it's going to come up saying I've got an issue. I can also choose to have the extrusion go in just one direction or both. I've got it going in both around the center point. I've been able to choose that because I chose to make my sketch in the center line, a center plane of the mug. But with that attempt, I'm just going to try hitting enter, and yes, it's going to tell us we've got a problem. So this is a bit of an issue. It's something that commonly happens when you're trying to extrude a linear extrusion onto the side of a cylindrical existing projection. So with that problem, I'm going to go in and I'm going to go and edit the profile. What could I do? Well, there's a few things I could try to do. I could either think more carefully about how I create my extrusion in the first place. I could recess and remove material. So I could create a line that runs down like so. Very difficult to stop it from snapping all the time. There we go, zoomed in a bit to prevent that. And then I could use Smart Dimension to set a distance away from the body of the mug. Let's try and do this again from there to there, please. There we go. Let's make that 0.5mm. And I could use my trim tool again. So I don't want that. Don't want that. Don't want that. And then I could go and trim more material away to try and create a handle which is floating in space. And let's see if that fixes the problem we just had. So there's our handle, there's the extrude tool. From a sketch, I'm going to tick that, and I'm going to move away, and you see automatically it's starting to fill in this region. So that was the error. So I could obviously select that and make it, and then finish. And what we now have is a shape that is reasonably satisfactory for us. We've also got this sketch still visible. I can choose to hide my sketch, so I could untick that to remove it from visibility, but I still obviously have a bit of a problem here. There's this horrible sort of like mixture of geometry going on where the handle is floating away from a mug. Well, maybe we could try and go about fixing our issue a different way. Previously I basically created the geometry, so ended up with this gap you can just about see between the two. So what about if we went the other way and we actually created some geometry inside that of the liquid vessel walls? So let's just do that. Let's try going and doing some undoing. So I've undone back to the point where I've got the geometry. Let's edit the profile. And now let's get stuck in and create another line. Be quite careful here, which is nice and horizontal, nice and vertical even. Control that distance, so I'm just going to smart dimension. Let's make it 1 millimeter, and then let's create some additive geometry. So once again, we now need to be a bit careful in the way we're going to develop this. So to try and continue this curve on, and that's done nothing. Excellent. Close that up, and now let's repeat our offset process from earlier on. 3 millimeters inside. Yep, seem happy with that. So let's just close that off with a right click. And now let me just work on developing this shape. So need to create some continuations. Maybe down to there. And another spline. Left clicking all the time, of course. So there to get our curve, and there to get the ear to end. And now let's try and work away on creating our extrusion. So we need to close up the geometry, so do a little bit of trimming. No trimming needed there. Delete that line so we now have an open shape. Remove that line because it's no longer needed. Check that there's no intersections there. Close the sketch. Take a different viewpoint so we can see what's going on. Try an extrusion. Choose from the sketch. Left click to select OK. Tell the computer we only want it to be 12 millimeters wide. And have a quick look at what we've made. So now you can see that there is no area where the material stops. It's not very elegant. It would have been better for us to perhaps try another technique I'll show you later on with a rail. We could run from the curved surface outwards. But with just extrusion, that is pretty much the limitation of what we can achieve. I could then tidy this shape up with some other functions like 3D filleting tools and 3D chamfering tools, but you do get the impression of the sort of complexity of the shape here, and it's a reasonably fast process. If you want to hide sketches again, you can turn them off by the ticks here at any time. Same thing with that plane. And that leaves us with a reasonable representation of our geometry. So next up we'll talk about revolve and revolved cut.